Hello, everyone. Welcome to our weekly discussion series that's hosted by the Chaldean Cultural Center in collaboration with U of M Detroit Center, Unique Voices in Films, and CMN TV. I'm your host, Tuiam Naimu, and my guest today is Rola Nashef. Hello, Rola.
Hi. Hello, everyone.
So, Rola is a writer, producer, director, and she's a professor of practice at Michigan State University. Born in Lebanon and raised in Michigan, her work centers around the cultural, familial, and social perspectives of the American Midwest. Her debut award-winning feature, Detroit Unleaded, holds its place in American cinema history as the very first Arab-American romantic comedy portraying second-generation Arab characters specific to Detroit and Dearborn. So I'm so happy to have you here today, Rola. We met a very, very long time ago because we went to the same film school, Motion Picture Institute of Michigan. You graduated a year before me. And seeing what you were working on, I reached out to you a few times seeking help and advice because you were moving along very quickly with your film. And you were fortunate enough that you completed it, which it was a great film. I had the chance to watch it during that time, and we'll talk a little bit about that later, and why it developed into what it was. But some of it has to do with your man. So tell us about your life there and when you came to the United States.
Sure. So first, thanks for having me again. It's been so great just to catch up with you and to talk with you. So, yeah, so I was born in Lebanon, and I was born in 1972, right at the start of the Lebanese Civil War. And my family and I immigrated when I was around 4.5. I turned 5 as soon as we came here. And it, my family never really expected to come here. We didn't necessarily, my parents thought they're going to wait out the war. They're just going to wait till things got better. And even when we came here, it was like, no, we're not staying here. Of course, we're going to go back to our country. So it was kind of like an unexpected immigrant, it was due to a tragic, incident that, we suffered through the war. And then that's what really prompted my family to all immigrate here. It was really
Do you remember any of that, Rola? That seems like a very young age. So do you have any memories of the war?
I do. Yep, I do. I have memories of the war, of the bombings, of a bomb shelter that we used to go to. We used to also sort of have people over from the neighborhood, from our building, and they would come and sit in our hallways like during bombings because it was like a low point in the building, and so it was like a safer spot. So a lot of my memories do come from that, like having all these people over and me not understanding that, hey, they're hiding out in our house. Actually, they're seeking shelter in our house. I just thought it was a party. I just thought, hey, all these people are over.
It's another Arabic hangout.
Exactly. So it's like my perception of the war. I have like this child perception of the war where I was like small and I'm looking at the adults around me, which for me, which seemed like, oh, everybody is doing fine, because that's kind of how the war was, in Lebanon. People would find peace wherever they could find it and not really dwell on it. Or, a lot of times people were like, no, this is not a war. This is how all wars start. No, it's just a conflict. This is not a war. So it was like, we're fine until we realize we're in the depths of a war, and so for me, I have like this perspective of war where I'm watching adults sort of deal with it or try to carry on with their life, despite a war or conflict, rising up. And so a lot of that was, I have like these really vivid memories of forming friends, through people coming over to our house. Me hosting all these people, especially their young kids and stuff. And so it was like, I didn't realize I was sitting in a bomb shelter. I also have really vivid memories of my family, we come from the south of Lebanon, and our life there was really enchanted, before the war. I come from two rural villages in the south. Magdushe is where my dad is from, and Denry Mess is where my mom is from. And so, it was a very peaceful, beautiful setting. We lived in the mountains, with the view of the sea. And so those are sort of my memories. It was like this mix of um, trauma, via the war, and this really beautiful, peaceful country. Living in the mountains. Anybody who lives in the mountains knows that there's like automatically a sense of peace just from living in the mountains. And so you juxtapose that with a war going on around you, and I think that's what sort of shaped my um, cinematic perspective as well, in terms of contrasting things and looking at things, juxtaposing two things, finding the irony and like in all these things, or the meaning in all of these things. And I think that even back then, I almost feel like that was where some of my artistic perceptions were forming.
Were picked up. And so then coming from that situation to the United States,
Hmm.
obviously, aside from the culture shock and the change, how did that feel? Because when I came here, we had missed, even though I was older, we were talking about this before we came live, that I came at age 10.
Hmm.
And so my trauma experiences had some other things to do, like there was political situations and things like that. So we didn't experience the war. And then I came here at an older age. And so, but then the culture shock, the acclimation, assimilation, there's a sense of guilt sometimes, that you're leaving people that are going through different situations behind. What was it like for you, Rola, coming at that age and experiencing all these different things here?
Yeah. Um, it was confusing. I remember, certain memories, because when we first came here, um, I didn't know where we were going. Like I remember my mom waking me up very early in the morning. It was unusual. And it felt like, where are we going? What's going on? We just had a party last night where everybody was like saying goodbye to us, but I didn't realize that they were saying goodbye to us for the last time. I thought it was just good night. And so my mom wakes me up in the morning, me and my little brother, who was 1 years old at the time. He's still a baby. And I just remember saying, "What are we doing? Where are we going?" And she just looks at me and she says, "We're going to America." I'm like, "Okay, cool," And so I didn't realize what was happening. What did the plane mean? What does moving to another country mean? So it was like, it felt like a little sea of confusion, for a bit. I remember landing in the airport at Detroit Metro, and just kind of landing in a sea of aunts and uncles, because half my family had already immigrated, and that's how we made it here. Is my family had applied, for our visas, and it did come, right in the nick of time. And so I do remember, landing at the airport, being greeted by just aunts and uncles, that I haven't seen, or some that I haven't met before, cousins, and just being engulfed with all this love, for my family, and people crying and people missing each other. My mom's brothers and sisters hadn't seen each other in so long. And so I do have like really great memories of being, very comfortable and feeling very safe, because I was engulfed in this incredible family that, all immigrated here together and helped each other. We never left each other here. And so there was that feeling, of, okay, I feel safe. But then entering like the American school system, that was like a whole different thing, because that was sort of my thing. That wasn't necessarily my parents' thing. My parents were figuring out American life, American systems, getting a job, making money, getting us a house, and doing all of the things that new immigrants have to do, especially when you, because my parents, again, they didn't expect to come here. They weren't really preparing to immigrate. It was a situation where we had to. And so they were, figuring that out. And so it was really up to me to figure out this American school system. So it was a bit like, the Peanuts, Charlie Brown and the Peanuts, how the teacher is always like, want, 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 It was kind of like that. Like that's how I think of like my first couple years of
Mhm.
school here. Like people talking to me, and I'm like, I don't know what is going. I don't know where. I don't know what this is, but it's kind of fun. I'm meeting some cool people.
Mhm.
So it was um, me trying to figure out where I am, who's who, what's what. And I also think that when I look back on it now, I think that probably helped me to become a filmmaker, because that's what filmmakers do. They figure out things, that we have to figure out how this system works and that system works, and try to move our stories within these systems. And that's kind of what I was doing, with school, like trying to figure everything out. And it was a huge language barrier. I was an ESL kid for a long time, and I just wasn't picking up English. It took me a long time to pick up English. And I remember my parents being very scared for me, like, I'm not doing well in school. And they began to panic a bit, and so they began to get really strict on, learning English. And that's where the Arabic started to go, because I had to
Mhm.
focus on English because I wasn't learning it. I wasn't speaking English for a couple of years.
Yeah,
Um,
you were just probably an artist in your head, and they're wondering what's wrong with you. And you're like, I'm just an artist. I'm
that's true.
floating. I have all these ideas in my head. You guys will have to wait a while to see what manifests, which this is, you've talked already about how these experiences affected you as a filmmaker. And I almost feel like the way you're talking as if that's something that you knew right when you were 5 years old or 4 years old.
Isn't it funny?
Yeah, like it really sounds like it because you're already identifying that and the character of your characteristics with the filmmaker from that time. It wasn't like something that developed over time. When did you realize that you wanted to be a filmmaker, and how was that received by the community, who, this is not, let's just say it's not like the favorite kind of profession.
It's not the first choice amongst Arab American parents. We're gonna say that for sure.
Mhm.
Um, it actually took me a long time. I had no idea that I was a filmmaker or an artist, or that I was creative. I didn't even really understand the word creative until, well after college. So it did take a while. I always feel like I was on a track, but it wasn't so conscious, I didn't really identify it always. I had no idea that I was an artist, or, that I could create something with these ideas, so it did take me a long time. I did not, I grew up playing music, thanks to my parents, and my brother's a musician, and and also a music teacher. And so we did have music in our lives, with our family. Um, but that was about it. Like I didn't even take an art class really, until I went to, later on, even after college is when I started taking art classes. And so it took me a while. And I remember, after going through so many different, I went to several different colleges and universities. I majored in so many different things, everything from accounting to public relations to, I was going to be a paralegal at one point. I wanted to work in a law office. Um, I did all kinds of stuff. So, marketing research. I was studying statistics. And so I was doing all these different things, and nothing really clicked. It's like I was liking certain aspects of all these different things, but I couldn't see myself being an accountant or working in a law office. And I remember my friend Rana said to me one day, she's like, I don't know what you're supposed to do, but it's not this, I don't know what it is, but it's not what you're studying. And so, all these series of events happen, and I ended up moving to Dearborn, in Detroit. I was an AmeriCorps at Access, the Arab Community Center, and that was really the first time that I was, really living in a neighborhood where had like a really high concentrated Arab American community. I'd always had Arab American friends throughout Michigan State University. We always had like, a group of friends. We had an organization called Arab Student Organization, and we did a lot of cool, interesting cultural events, through that organization. So we were always surrounded by Arab friends. But when I moved to Detroit, it was like the first time I was seeing like entire neighborhoods filled with nothing but Lebanese immigrants, or Yemeni immigrants, in the South End, or, wherever, all these different pockets. And it just seems so cinematic to me. And I just kind of kept thinking, this is interesting. And then at Access, I remember finding a file for a film that they did, a really great documentary called Tales of Arab Detroit. And it was the production file. And I remember looking through it and thinking, I think I do this, because I had been staging all these events and basically producing shows, producing speakers, coordinating different events through Access and at Michigan State University. I remember looking through it going, I think I do this. I think I'm a producer. Like this is what a producer does. Because a producer is somebody who takes all these elements and pulls them together, and makes them line up. And so I felt like, okay, I think I do this, as like an events coordinator and everything I had been doing for a few years. And then I started meeting artists. I started meeting Arab American artists, Chaldean artists. And I started thinking, I think I'm kind of like these people, and I always felt very fortunate because I had never really met artists before I started working at the Arab Community Center. It was one of the best things that, had happened to me there. I learned so many great things there, and it's such a great institution. But meeting artists I always thought it was so special in a way that the first artists I was ever meeting were Arab American artists. How rare is that? And then on top of that, those are the first artists I was meeting, and filmmakers as well. And so that's when kind of things started pulling together for me. Like in my head, I started connecting all these dots, and I had this inkling to make a film. I never had an inkling to make a film before. I'm not like a huge film
Now,
fan.
Rola, is this all before you went to MPI?
Yes.
Okay,
So as soon as I got
interesting.
that inkling, I'm like, I want to make a film. Like I want to produce a film. That's what I was thinking.
Mhm.
And I remember like about Arab women. That was my first thought. And then I remember pitching it to this Arab, this Lebanese American director friend that I had, made a friend, and he was like, "I'm not remotely interested in your idea."
Of course.
I felt rejection. I'm like, "Oh, I think my idea just got rejected." And so I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And then a few days later, MPI had advertised in the paper saying, hey, you go to film school. It was like a quirky little, marketing, little advertising thing in the newspaper. And that's when I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. I'm going to go to film. I'm going to make this movie. I'm going to make it. And so it kind of took that rejection and then the advertisement and like the school opening up for the first time, all of those things sort of came together. And the first day at MPI, I realized, oh, okay, I'm like these people, these filmmakers. And all these things I was studying, they also had their place in my first feature film. PR, writing contracts, marketing research, studying statistics, all these classes I was taking, they all had their place, in the making of my first film. So it was kind of like this zigzaggy way for me to come to the conclusion that, oh yeah, I'm a filmmaker. That's what I was supposed to do. And then I've just been making films ever since and developing projects ever since.
Yeah. Well, I love the story. The way you're saying it, you're making it sound easier than it actually is,
Mm,
because you followed up and you completed it. And I know during that time, I went to film school a year after you, and I got connected. I think one of the advisors maybe mentioned you during that time. They said, "Oh, you should connect with her," because I was trying to make my film at that
mm.
time. And during that time, and I was, like I said, a year after you, I was the only female student in the whole class.
Wow.
Okay, yeah, that's how long. It's not like that anymore, but and so I did feel like sometimes, like when it was lab night and all the men just felt like I had no business getting near the equipment, and everybody's like attacking it. But I did reach out to you because I saw that you were moving forward in a very smooth fashion. That wasn't the case with me when I was working on my first film, and I had different family circumstances and all that at the time, but you were trying to be helpful. And for me, it was a very long process, and it requires a lot of work. And putting both of us aside, I know many people who have had the script, and they can't get it to the next level to production. I know, unfortunately, a lot of people, and I can understand and sympathize with what gets in the way. But you didn't let anything get in your way, and you did a wonderful film that really represented the Arab American community in Michigan because it was authentic. You addressed, tell us the story, what it's about, and how did you have, or I felt like it was courageous of you to be so honest in it, but I felt that that was also what made it very successful and for us to be able to laugh and love the characters at the same time. Can you tell us what the story is about and, how you went about putting it together?
Sure. Yeah. So it's called Detroit Unleaded. It's considered the first Arab American romantic comedy, and it's about this young Lebanese American guy who inherits his family's gas station after a tragic death of his father. And so his life sort of takes this left turn, and he finds himself now, after 10 years working behind the cage, like really sort of discontent with his day job. And then this girl walks in, this Lebanese girl walks in, she's delivering phone cards for her brother's phone store, and there's a spark of interest, and they begin to date at the gas station. So they begin to sort of create their own space within this world that they kind of want out of. And so the film was a 9-year project from concept. Then I created a short out of it, Detroit Unleaded, the short, which was released in 20 no in yeah in 2006. Sorry, that was released in 2006, and that went to a bunch of film festivals and went to like 30 film festivals all over the world. It won 3 awards as well. It won award for acting, for performance, and a couple other like best film awards. I can't remember now off the top of my head, at these various film festivals. And then the audience reaction to the short is really what made me develop it into a feature, because the audience it was a 20-minute short, and one of my longest Q&As was 2 hours long, over a 20-minute short, because there was just so many questions that they had about the characters, like what happens to the characters, or the various issues that were brought up in the film, like in terms of gas, what happens in gas stations, the Arab American clerk behind the glass behind the counter, and the predominantly African American clientele that they serve, and like some of the racial tension that happens between these two communities, and how it's played out through the glass. That was always a metaphor that I was working with, and so it just was able to spark all this dialogue, and also people kept saying like, I want to see more. They wanted to see more of the characters. And so that really spoke to me. I thought I was going to finish Detroit Unleaded, the short, and move on to my feature, which I'm working on now. But I see now that, like, because this one is just more ambitious. And so I needed to actually turn this into a feature. And so that's what I did. And so that was the first time I had developed a feature-length script. And so that script then went on to the Sundance Institute Screenwriters Lab. And that was a huge step up for me. It was the first time, first I was, accepted by Sundance, the Sundance Institute, and that was huge. They're a huge supporter of independent films and filmmakers, and they're huge supporters of underrepresented voices, which is exactly what I needed at that time to really see, for someone like Sundance, to see the importance of an Arab American voice, an Arab American story. And so after I went to Sundance, that's what really gave me some confidence. My mentors are really great. They said that the script has a lot of potential, and they gave me some great feedback. And that's what really gave me the confidence to come back here and produce it independently with my executive producers, my family, and to raise the money ourselves here in Michigan with private investors, and really produce the film independently here in Michigan. And that's exactly what we did. And that, from the script, was a 3-year process. So within 3 years, I had written the script, fundraised the budget, And then the summer of 2010, we went into production, starting with casting. We actually started casting in January of 2010, and I think that was my favorite part. I feel like the casting was such a grassroots, community effort. Half of our actors are people who've never acted before. The other half are experienced actors or were aspiring actors. It was a great mix, an amazing mix of talent. And I also knew that, acting, like we discussed, acting, filmmaking, art, it's something that is still being cultivated within our community, especially the Arab American community. I feel like there's a lot more artists and filmmakers in the Middle East. But here, parents tend to be um, more nervous for their kids and supporting themselves, and they want them to have a good job and all of this. And so, it, Arab American parents, do tend to get strict with their kids, which is fine. That's great. But my parents, I remember when I came to the conclusion that I was going to go to film school. I remember calling my brother and saying, "Hey, can you come with me? I'm gonna break the news to mom and dad that I am not going to finish my college degree. Instead, I'm going to drop out and go to film school."
Oh my goodness.
Going, okay, here's what's going on. I'm going to go to film school. My brother Marwan to help me, tell them. And the first thing they said, I had no idea what to expect. And the first thing they said was, "Okay, you're our daughter, and we support you."
Hmm.
Um, and that's exactly what they did. And if only more Arab American parents, could be at least open minded, to the idea, because I feel that we have lots of different success in our community, across the country. There's many different successful, Arab American, pockets, throughout the country. But media is important. It's how we view the world. And so doesn't, we can have all these doctors and successful engineers and all these people that help build our world within our community. But if the media is constantly skewing our image, then we're not projecting like who we authentically are to other people. And unfortunately, because I think, once you have direct experiences with people, it's a completely different experience than watching it through media. But if we can match up our direct experience to the media experience a little bit more, there wouldn't be such a schism, in terms of our image in the media, as opposed to the reality of the situation, which is we're a very diverse community. We have all types of people in our community.
And at the end of the day, it is our responsibility. So we can just say, well, that person is not represented. We have to represent ourselves. And so this area, I felt for a while now, maybe in the beginning, not so, maybe our community was still focused on other things and more survival issues. But I feel like as a community, we can afford today to do this, to go into film and media. And when we were casting, like for the film that I worked on, I could not believe the enormous number of talent out there. Like I thought, wow, we have this talent that needs to be utilized that would do our community so much service.
Mhm.
We can shift the narration of our whole region, of the whole Arab world, by utilizing the importance of cinema. And we can afford to. That's the thing. We have the talent, we have the resources, we have the money, we really have everything. There's no reason. And most people, I know, Sofia Coppola, one time that there was like this Zoom meeting, and she said, "Oh, to be a filmmaker, you just make sure that you still have a full-time job and do this." And I thought, wow, she's saying this, and you would think that she was just a filmmaker 24/7. So we can afford to do films, once a year, once every 2 years, once every 4 years, and still have those other jobs that people rely on. But I did not know until now you told me, which I think this is an inspiration in itself and shows your hard work. The 9-year period that it took from the planting of the seed for Detroit Unleaded until it was completed. we tend to, as outsiders, sometimes when we're looking at something and we don't know the datelines and we don't see the thread that started it all, and how the, like, just how a dress comes together. You don't see all the details. And when you just told me that, it's proof that hard work does pay off in commitment, and that seems to have it wasn't as smooth sailing as maybe I had imagined. So, having said that, what advice would you give, um, you know, uh, artists, especially Arab American filmmakers, because, like you said, there is an underrepresentation. There is this kind of lack of maybe family support when it comes to the arts. What advice would you give them, who are going into filmmaking or writing and that profession?
Sure, yeah. I think the advice I would give them is to write, actually. I think and to stay in practice, whether you're in film school or an independent filmmaker, you're gonna, study on your own and make a film on your own. Whether you want to be a cinematographer, a director, or a screenwriter, I think by honing in on your writing skills and storytelling skills is a great way to stay in practice, because you're not always going to be on set. You're not always going to be shooting something if you're a DP, but you could always be developing stories. And I think that development and that study of storytelling is so important, because we have so much access to technology, right? And so, but high production value is not necessarily rooted in a sleeker frame, a better resolution camera, or perfect lighting. Yes, all that stuff contributes to beautiful artistry and work. But if your storytelling isn't as well developed or well executed as your cinematography, then your film could not sit with an audience as well as you want it to. And so I would say to stay in practice in terms of writing stories, developing ideas, talking out your stories with people. You don't always have to be a writer. If you want to just solely be a director, that's fine. Just solely want to be a cinematographer, but to constantly study the fundamentals of storytelling, and what makes a good story, and how can we improve the storytelling. So I think that would be my number one advice to younger artists, young filmmakers, especially Arab American filmmakers, because our storytelling is not. We don't have a genre. I'm trying my best. Other Arab American filmmakers you're trying your best. Like, we're all trying our best, but we don't have like a plethora of Arab American films. We don't have a category in Netflix, because we don't have enough Arab
Yeah,
American,
that's right.
you know.
And I remember one time, we had met for some. I'd seen you at some event, and we were talking, and you were asking me what I was doing now, and I was mentioning, because I write a lot of books. That's the thing that I really love. And I don't know how I said something to the effect of, I don't know, and I'm working on this, and then I stopped and I said, I don't know, I'm doing all these things. I don't know if it matters. And you said, everything matters. You said everything matters, and I remember that, and I thought, over time, when I see like how it does matter, how it, even if it doesn't matter in the market, it matters on how strong it makes you as a writer, as a storyteller, your confidence.
Mhm.
People, and you never know. I mean, it's sometimes it's that one person that reads that book that gets something from it. So everything does matter, I think, for people, and not to underestimate what they're doing. If they're putting a story and they feel like, oh, it's not going anywhere, or it's been years. But aside from that, so one last question before we leave
Mhm.
is, what are you working on now? What can we look for in the near future from Rola?
Sure. Um, so I'm working on my next feature film now, and it's a story. It's a coming of age story about these four Lebanese girls, set in 1995. So it's really the story of my generation. I feel like it's the story that should have been told 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And it's about these young women who are navigating marriage, love, friendship, and family. And it's about their moms as well, and their father. So it's like a family movie meets romantic comedy. So it's like My Big Fat Greek Wedding. It's definitely a wedding movie. So
Well,
that's my next project.
I'm really looking forward to your next film because I did, like I said, I enjoyed the first one. I enjoyed the authenticity. Just feeling that we're represented outside of the stereotype, that box. Because even in your film, each character is different. When our Arab friends are all different from each other, we are individuals, and sometimes for for a lot of us, and I think it is the fault of not being or not telling our stories enough. We are placed in a group, like we're grouped, like this whole family acts this way, or that whole that whole country acts a certain way. So it's really wonderful what you do. We look forward to your new work, and thank you for joining us again, Roa.
Thank you so much, William. I appreciate you and all your work as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you everyone for watching. Have a wonderful day.